This video is brought to you by Squarespace. If you need a website or domain, go to squarespace.com. Hey everyone, and welcome to a new video. If you hang around photography circles long enough, you'll hear the term compression. But if you ask 4 people what it is and what causes it, you'll get 4 different answers. So expect some action in the comments on this one. In this video, I'll explain how compression is a type of distortion and how to use it creatively in your photography to take better photos and avoid common mistakes. If you stay till the end, I'll even show you how to fix a type of distortion in processing. From this to this in a few easy clicks. My name is Simon d'Entremont and I'm a professional nature and wildlife photographer living in Eastern Canada. I make weekly videos giving you photo tips or taking you behind the scenes for nature photography. Subscribe if you want to see more. So a few weeks ago, I posted a video wherein I showed how changing the distance to the subject could change the relative size of the subject to the background. I got several messages as a result where people were interested in better understanding these concepts and how this was related to compression. Okay, when we talk about compression, what are we actually talking about? Generally, it's the sense that some factors that the photographer can control can change the look of an image, more specifically, the relationship between the subject and the background, and the perceived distance between them. Let's look at some examples which will really show off what we're talking about here. In this experiment, I'm going to show you photos of myself taken at various focal lengths. In each shot, I won't move, but the viewpoint of the camera will change to keep my face the same size in each shot. 15 millimeters, 20 millimeters, 35, 50, 70, 100, 150, 200, 400. Now let's take note of a few things here, because what's at play here is actually several phenomena, not just one. First, when really close, there is a distortion that happens called wide angle distortion or extension distortion. This is the feature where objects close to the lens appear abnormally large and stretched compared to farther objects. If you have your phone on you, put your camera on 0.5 magnification and take a picture of yourself up close. Check out your big nose. This happens because the closer an object is to a viewpoint like a camera, the larger its magnification. When really close like this, your nose is much closer than your ears, let's say, and as such appears much larger. The byproduct of this is that while close objects look really close, farther objects look much farther away, extending the perceived distance between the subject and the background, hence the name extension distortion. Things in the background look small, and you can see a wider swath of the background as well. Now, as we back up further and use longer focal lengths, we see change that happens gradually. 1, my features start looking less distorted. Between 50 and 70 millimeters on a full-frame camera is where most people would suggest the subject looks normal, i.e. not distorted. 2, we see that the background is getting larger and larger in the frame. We see less of it and its features because they're being enlarged and they look blurrier. How is this happening? What's going on here is that as we back up and use longer focal lengths, we see a smaller field of view. When we keep the subject the same size as we back up, the field of view is getting smaller in the background, revealing less of it and making it look blurrier. Also, longer focal lengths make for a thinner depth of field, so the background is indeed actually getting less in focus. And finally, as we get to the longest focal lengths, like 400 millimeters, the background is looking much larger and closer to the subject, less far in the distance. And even though nothing has changed, the perceived distance between them appears to be less and have been compressed, hence the term compression. I'd like to thank the sponsor of this video, Squarespace. If you haven't heard of them, they're an all-in-one website platform that helps you create your website from scratch, just like I did. You don't need any coding experience or even to be tech savvy. They have lots of templates to choose from to make it easy to get your own website up and running in no time. Now, even though they have great templates, like ones for photography, for example, the place to go now is to use their new design intelligence feature, using both Squarespace's experience and cutting-edge AI, helping you tailor your own website to your own needs. It looks really professional to have your own online galleries to show your work, your own domain, and a website is a great way to monetize your work by setting up an online store using Squarespace payments, which you can set up with just a few clicks. You can even do buy now and pay later with options like Afterpay. Go to squarespace.com to sign up for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Simon for 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. So in the end, wide angle or extension distortion is the opposite of compression distortion, one at the close end and one at the far end. Now, some people call this distortion at the long focal length lens compression, and they say that compression is a feature of longer focal length lenses. Like this photo of mine, where this lighthouse over 1 kilometer away has been compressed closer to the bird. Are they right? They're onto something, but not technically right. You see, as we used longer focal lengths earlier, compression did increase, but was it the lens? Not really. What actually caused the compression was the fact that we got further and further away. You see, part of the phenomenon that causes compression is what happens to the relative distance of the subject and the background to the photographer. As we get farther back, the distance to the subject and background get more similar to each other. You see, when we're really close, the subject may be much closer to the photographer than the background. But this is called flattening the image. But it's the distance that's responsible, not the lens. Now, how can we prove this, that it's not the lens? Let's say you're photographing dangerous wildlife like a lion, sports from the sidelines, or auto racing from a safe distance. If you want to make the subject larger in the frame, you can use a longer focal length. If longer lenses cause compression, you would have a closer background from the longer lens photo than a shorter focal length one. But guess what? If I crop the shorter focal length lens to the same field of view as the long one, see what happens? The photos are the same. There is no change in perception nor relationship between subject and background with longer lenses, just magnification. So perspective changes and distortions are caused by distance, getting closer and farther, not the lens per se. Now, it is true that using a longer lens makes you stand farther back to fit the subject in the frame, and that from farther back, the compression will be greater. But it's the standing farther back that physically did it, not the lens. So now we know that distortions and effects like compression are caused by being closer or farther to our subject with different lens choices. How can we use this to improve our photography? First, being close, which causes extension distortions, can be used on purpose to distort features artistically. In people, this is used in films, like this one, Delicatessen, with really wide-angle lenses like 14mm to create great effects. Or you can distort the body of a model, giving her long legs, or give hard rockers big boots by getting close with shorter focal lengths like 20mm. If your model has a large nose and doesn't want that accentuated, then don't get too close with a short lens. Get a 50mm lens or a 24-70 at 70mm and stand farther back. Being close can also be used to make the subject large and background small, which can help give you the proportions you want to balance the foreground and background sizes. Remember, getting close will magnify your foreground element much more than the background, so you can play with their proportions. Now, people who do architecture photography are dealing with these distortions all the time. You can shoot really wide and close indoors to exaggerate shapes and curves, so you can use it to your advantage. Outdoors, you can use the distortion of buildings artistically to create great shapes and lines, as the base of a tall building will be larger than the distant top using a wide lens like a 15 or 20mm lens. So the closer you get, the more you can distort the structure. You can do it artistically too. But if you'd rather shoot a building the way it looks at normal perspective to get the dimensions closer to accurate, you need to stand farther back to reduce the wide-angle distortions using maybe a longer lens like 50mm. Or get some high ground where your distance to the top and the bottom of the building are the same. By the way, follow me on Facebook and Instagram, where I almost always give a tip with every post. And sign up for my email list to get a free copy of my guide for shooting backlit. Links below. Now at the longer end, how do you use this knowledge? First, you can break up background clutter by moving farther back with longer lenses. In these photos of mine, there are distractions in the background, but the compression and making of the background larger in the frame has made those elements less intrusive in my photo and harder to stand out. Or bring a background object up close to your subject, like this harvest moon I shot behind my buddy's plane, where the two aspects of the image are compressed together. To get the moon large, I needed a long lens to make the moon large, but for him to be far enough from me to be small. A shorter lens and this plane closer to me would make the moon smaller in the frame, like this. Or the opposite. For this shot of a lion, I wanted to include the background and have it be visible in the shot. Nice clouds and rolling hills. So rather than using a 500mm lens farther back, I used a 70-200 at 200mm up close, which included some identifiable background for a sense of place. Now, after the photo has been taken, can you fix some of these distortions if you didn't want them? Most types of distortions of perception can't be fixed, as it's hard to change the relative dimensions and change in field of view of the background. But wide-angle lenses also have optical distortions, different from perception distortions, which may change the shape and curvature of features or straight lines. Optical distortions can actually be fixed, like this lighthouse shot at 17mm. The structure seems to be leaning to the right. In Lightroom, first go to Lens Corrections and hit Enable Profile Corrections. This will pull up a stored map of the lens optical distortions and apply a profile to the image, removing some of the distortions, basically correcting for the optical aberrations. Next, go down to the Transform tab. I've never found the auto function to work very well, so I like to use guided. Now you need to draw two straight lines, one vertical up and down and the other along the horizon. First, try to get the straight up and down right. On a regular building, it's easy, just follow one of the sides. For this lighthouse with an odd shape, I'm just going to slice it down the middle like I'm cutting it in half. Then another line along the horizon. And voila, straight lighthouse. Want to learn more about processing tricks in Lightroom, like I just showed you? I have a whole playlist, which you can see right here. If you thought this video deserving, give it a like and YouTube will share it with even more photographers looking to better understand distortions. And I hope that you can use this the very next time you go out to get your own unique and amazing photos. I know you can do it.